As much as Donald Trump tries to spin Charlie Kirk's death for political gain, he doesn't actually want people examining the real story too closely. His strategy is to shift blame onto liberals for political violence in America, but the facts point in a very different direction. A new FBI report has surfaced that directly challenges the narrative Trump has been pushing in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shooting, and it seriously undermines his claims. We're going to break this down piece by piece. But first, if you're finding value here, take a quick moment to like the video, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps us keep going. Now, let's begin with Kash Patel, a central figure in this cover-up, who has faced mounting criticism not only for his involvement here, but also for his broader failures in leadership, highlighted by Representative Jasmine Crockett.
But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe, I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically, as a black woman, definitely don't feel safe. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice, or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem. The one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
From the start, I've pushed back against the effort to glorify Charlie Kirk as something he never was. He wasn't a civil rights leader, and he wasn't a defender of free speech. What truly drove him was power and profit. His politics were built on performance, not on creating real change or improving lives. The movement he built thrived on division. And that same division is exactly what we're seeing from the right in the wake of his death. And here's the reality. When liberals stay silent, when Democrats hesitate out of fear, it leaves the field wide open for Republicans to control the narrative and push their agenda unchecked. That's what's happening right now. They're using some of the most outrageous arguments imaginable to defend their authoritarian project, but those arguments collapse under real scrutiny. Before I show you exactly how, let's first take a listen to what's being pushed on Fox.
It's just a shame. And he should know better as a grown man in show business. People are acting like, you know, he's just some homeless guy screaming things on the corner. This guy is at ABC. When's the last time ABC tolerated much, let alone this?
Right. You know, I'm watching some of the liberal networks. I've never heard them care about the Constitution so much. Their First Amendment, First Amendment. This has nothing to do with the First Amendment. This has to do with the business decision, as you noted. And for all the concern about the First Amendment, I mean, they're apoplectic, Jesse. What about all the amendments that Charlie Kirk lost? Because Charlie Kirk has no amendments right now, none. And the outrage I see over Jimmy Kimmel, I wish I would have seen that for the death of a father and a husband who should still be here.
Yeah, they got their priorities all out of whack.
From the start, I've pushed back against the effort to glorify Charlie Kirk as something he never was. He wasn't a civil rights leader, and he wasn't a defender of free speech. What truly drove him was power and profit. His politics were built on performance, not on creating real change or improving lives. The movement he built thrived on division. And that same division is exactly what we're seeing from the right in the wake of his death. And here's the reality. When liberals stay silent, when Democrats hesitate out of fear, it leaves the field wide open for Republicans to control the narrative and push their agenda unchecked. That's what's happening right now. They're using some of the most outrageous arguments imaginable to defend their authoritarian project, but those arguments collapse under real scrutiny. Before I show you exactly how, let's first take a listen to what's being pushed on Fox. No evidence found yet of ties between Charlie Kirk's shooting and left-wing groups. Official says 3 people familiar with the federal probe into Kirk's assassination told NBC News that investigators have yet to find a link between the alleged shooter and left-wing groups. The federal investigation into the assassination of Charlie Kirk has yet to find a link between the alleged shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, and left-wing groups on which President Trump and his administration have pledged to crack down on after the killing. One person familiar with the federal investigation said that thus far there is no evidence connecting the suspect with any left-wing groups. Every indication so far is that this was one guy who did one really bad thing because he found Charlie Kirk's ideology personally offensive. In addition, 2 of the people familiar with the probe said it may be difficult to charge Robinson at the federal level for Kirk's killing, while the third source said that there is still an expectation that some kind of federal charge is filed against Robinson. Over the past week, Donald Trump has focused on blaming the left for nearly everything, but that narrative simply doesn't hold up. While the full details about the shooter are still developing, what we've seen is the FBI appearing more interested in drawing connections between left-leaning groups or even pro-trans communities in this tragedy. The kind of framing risks being used as justification to target everyday Americans, suppress dissent, and limit free expression. This is exactly why we cannot allow Charlie Kirk to be remembered as something he was not. He built division, not unity. If we accept the narrative that he was some positive cultural figure, we're essentially validating Trump's false claim that liberals are to blame. The truth is, Donald Trump has fueled political hostility, while the Republican Party has spent decades blocking real reforms that would make Americans safer from gun violence. We cannot let that truth be rewritten, and we cannot allow blame to be forced onto those who don't deserve it. That's why it was so important to see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez push back against a new bill seeking to honor Charlie Kirk, a bill that, unfortunately, too many Democrats supported. She stood her ground and called it out clearly.
Today, the Republican House majority brought to the floor a resolution honoring, quote, honoring the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's assassination was a horrific and vile attack and incident of political violence. And condemning the depravity of Kirk's brutal murder is a straightforward matter, one that is especially important to help stabilize an increasingly unsafe and volatile political environment where everyday people feel more at risk. We can deeply disagree and come together as a country to denounce the horror of this killing. And it is not a license for the abuse of power and whitewashing of American history. Today's resolution only underscores the majority's recklessness by choosing to author this condemnation and honoring on a purely partisan basis, instead of uniting Congress in this tragedy with one of the many bipartisan options to condemn political violence and Kirk's murder, as we did with the late Melissa Hortman. Instead, the majority proceeded with a resolution that brings great pain to the millions of Americans who endured segregation, Jim Crow, and the legacy of bigotry today. We should be clear about who Charlie Kirk was. A man who believed that the Civil Rights Act that granted Black Americans the right to vote was a mistake, who after the violent attack on Paul Pelosi claimed that, quote, some amazing patriot, unquote, should bail out his brutal assailant, and accused Jews of controlling, quote, not just the colleges, it's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it, unquote. His rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, and sought to disenfranchise millions of Americans, far from the working, quote, working tirelessly to promote unity, unquote, asserted by the majority in this resolution. It is equally important that Congress does unite to reject the government's attempt to weaponize this moment into an all-out assault on free speech across the country, all in the name of Charlie Kirk. President Trump and the FCC are now cynically threatening to shut down ABC and any outlets who give airtime to the administration's political critics. This is a disgusting attack on the American people and the very First Amendment rights that define us as a country. It is also the ABC Corporation's responsibility to refuse to embolden and participate in this corruption and escalation of censorship. We continue to pray for Mr. Kirk's family and loved ones in the wake of this terrible act. I am thinking especially of his children and his wife, whose grief cannot be measured. And with that, I yield back to the gentleman.
I bid the lady good day.
Donald Trump is once again using this tragedy to push his authoritarian agenda. Let's be clear, Charlie Kirk was not a hero, and we cannot ignore the reality of who he was or the harmful politics still being pushed by those around him. His widow has stepped directly into that same right-wing space, becoming involved in political fundraising efforts. Meanwhile, Trump is twisting the response to fit his own storyline. He even claimed Jimmy Kimmel's show was suspended because of public outrage over comments about the Kirk shooting. But if you look at what was actually said, it wasn't outrageous at all. Kimmel simply pointed out that Trump was exploiting the moment. This wasn't about backlash, ratings, or economics. It was about pressure and intimidation from those in power. And here's the double standard. If public outrage is supposedly the reason someone should be taken off air, then why is Brian Kilmeade still on Fox News after making comments about homeless people that were both harmful and dehumanizing? Not long after, a tragic shooting took place at a homeless encampment in Minnesota, costing a woman her life, and his words only added fuel to that climate of hate. If accountability is real, it must be applied consistently. That's why we have to keep speaking out and refusing to be silenced. If you want to support that work, hit subscribe, drop a like, and if you made it to the end, leave a blue heart in the comments. Until next time, I'll see you.